an international panel actually. So we have representation from the Digital Office and the Improvement Service in Scotland, MHCLG in England, and we also have somebody from the Danish Embassy. So I'm just actually going to invite the participants up to the stage. We'll get them to introduce themselves. I've got some questions to ask them, and then we will take some questions from the audience. Jenny, just as I'm introducing the others up to the stage, do you want to just start introducing yourself? Just tell us a wee bit about your role at the Digital Office.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so I'm Jenny Syme. I'm one of the program managers at the Digital Office. I'm responsible for digital leadership and skills, and as a result of the pandemic, I'm also now responsible for collaboration and Microsoft 365 adoption. Yeah, so I think our role in the Digital Office is working with partner organisations, predominantly councils, but we also work alongside Sarah at the Improvement Service, amongst others, to deliver things for local government. Thanks, Esther.
Per, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Per Andersen. I am the head of the digital section at the Danish Embassy in London. And more importantly, in this respect, I'm the one that works with Danish IT companies in the UK. We have a particular focus on digitization of the public sector. And as a part of that, we quite often compare and contrast the way the public sector in Denmark and the UK works to share information there. So my contribution today will not so much be with how we work at the embassy, but more that I will, from my viewing point here in London, I'm one of those that haven't been able to travel much, but from my viewing point here, we'll be able to maybe give some information about how the Danish public sector in general has weathered the coronavirus restrictions.
All right, thanks, Per. Sam?
Hello, I'm Sam. I'm a collaboration manager at the Local Digital Collaboration Unit at the Ministry for Housing, Community and Local Government, which is two acronyms that I'm not expecting anyone to remember, but the LDCU at MHCLG, that's what I do. Collaboration manager isn't a role that most people have heard of because it's not really a role, but broadly speaking, what we do is we have a fund for local government that we use to seed fund really great projects that help to, as we call it, fix the plumbing for local government. So that's helping to build the foundational structures and the data infrastructure and things that really support and underpin local government services. So I am part of selecting which projects that we choose to take forward, and also then supporting those projects on an ongoing basis as they kind of progress through alpha, progress through agile ways of working through discovery to beta. Yeah, so that's my role and that's why I'm here.
All right, and Sarah?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Gadsden. I'm the Chief Executive of the Improvement Service. So we're the go-to organisation for local government improvement in Scotland. We provide a range of support across a wide range of areas. So in a nutshell, we provide support on transformation, performance and improvement, data and intelligence, and we also provide digital public services. So some of you may have heard of My Account and the National Entitlement Card, which we deliver on behalf of Scotland.
Great. So thanks very much for everybody for introducing yourself. Just a couple of things before we start. So if everybody's on the virtual stage, if you if you turn your camera off or hide your mic, you will disappear, but you will actually still be on the stage. And the same goes for me. So yesterday I had some connectivity problems. So when I was on mute, I turned my camera off and people thought I'd disappeared, but I'm actually still here doing the facilitation. So so don't worry. If we have any issues with connectivity, we can always turn our cameras off. So I just really wanted to make a start, and I mean, I don't think anybody could have predicted what's happened this year. And I think the best laid plans, whether that's personally or within work, I don't think anybody's year has been the year that they expected. So I probably wanted to just come maybe first to Sarah and just say, I mean, I've seen you sharing some great stuff on social media around the role the Improvement Service has played supporting organisations to change their plans. And can you just talk a wee bit around how COVID has changed or shaped the strategic plans of yourself or the organisations that you support?
Yeah, thanks, Esther. I mean, we were probably in quite a fortuitous position because our strategic framework was due for renewal this year, so it would have ideally been available in summer, but when COVID, I guess, hit, it was a real opportunity for us to look at actually where can we add most value to local authorities and the partners that we work with. So we undertook a range of, I suppose, consultation with all the local authority chief executives, with the elected members, just to find out, you know, across the next 2 years, where do they think we can add most value in supporting them to respond to COVID, but also in relation to rebuilding after COVID. So that's led to 2 of our 4 strategic priorities for the next 2 years, actually focusing on COVID. So the first one is to support local government to live with COVID. And as Esther has highlighted, we're adapting our programmes, our products and services as necessary to support councils with their response and recovery. So we've moved all of our peer learning networks online. We've been publishing a range of research briefings, thought pieces, data dashboards to help councils look at how they will respond. We've been facilitating online collaboration through the Knowledge Hub. We've also been supporting a range of facilitated self-assessment to help councils to capture their learning from the response to the pandemic and look at how they will take that forward. In terms of our digital public services work, we've really had to pivot that because we've seen a rapid uptake in My Account. And I suppose there's a real demand for us to deliver a greater range of secure and sustainable digital services. So as an example, as I mentioned, we run the National Entitlement Card, which up until March required people to go into local offices to authenticate themselves and to get their cards. Clearly, with the lockdown, the local offices were closed. So we had to rapidly bring forward our plans to launch getyournec.scot. Which is a new online service that enables citizens to apply for and manage their National Entitlement Card online. And that's now being rolled out across councils. And I guess we've also had to look at how we can use our existing digital infrastructure to support some of the challenges councils are facing. So just a couple of quick examples. We've supported the application process for the COVID-19 business support grants, enabling the development of a standardised form that's digitised by all councils. We're now working with the government to evaluate the impact of that grant and looking at how we can use our data hub for data matching purposes to assess investigations into potential instances of fraudulent claims relating to the business support grants. And we also then, as another example, looked at how we could use our existing BizAccount platform to support Scottish Government and local government to deliver and administer the Transitional Support Fund for childcare providers. So I think in summary, we've just really had to look at what are our existing, I suppose, assets, capacity, skills across the organisation, and how do we really pivot those to add the most value that we can do without duplicating any work that councils are doing.
Thanks, Sarah. That was a really full answer, and I think the breadth of what you're actually involved in and what you're being able to deliver at pace is really amazing. And I think that it's actually taken into account as well that you're delivering that when your team are adapting and working from home as well. Sam, what's the picture like elsewhere in the UK? Then I know that you talked about funding projects and reviewing projects that are going ahead. Can you talk a wee bit about the English view and how COVID's changed or shaped the strategic plans within MHCLG?
Yeah, I can a little bit, and obviously a lot of what Sarah said chimes with what I've experienced as well. So I think we obviously saw masses of change and masses of moving to local authorities needing to work at pace that they have not worked at before, and we've had to try and use whatever tools are in our armoury to support them to do it. I think one thing that the COVID crisis has shown us is that more than ever we need small things loosely coupled when it comes to digital and technology, because we need to be able to change and replace and adapt and be flexible and meet these new circumstances. And so for us, it kind of, while it was a bit of a shock, it did sort of play into our ballpark and our messaging for what we kind of believe in anyway as being the future of digital services. When COVID hit, our team, you know, it's not immediately obvious what you do when you sort of run a fund and you work with local government in these circumstances, and they're like, we don't need money at this point, we need your support and things like that. So we immediately pivoted our work to be supportive and to kind of open up spaces for discussion and to share resources, rather than to kind of support ongoing work, because whether or not we were involved, that was going to be happening anyway. And then later on in the summer, when things had died down a little bit, we opened up a new funding round, which was purely for COVID related projects. So what we wanted to do at that point was, one, so kind of offer that monetary support at a time when it was right to, and then secondly, to understand a bit more about what the work that was going on across the national picture was and how we might get involved in it. So we asked people to bid on projects relating to data reporting, community engagement, and new working practices, because they seem to be the core themes that were coming out of our discussions. And we released £800,000 to 11 projects over the summer. 5 of them have finished, already delivered. Several more of them are just finishing up now. And they're based around, you know, these sorts of things that we saw with the COVID crisis, and that suddenly data sharing had to happen. Like, some of that legislative stuff kind of moved out of the way and enabled people to work together a little bit more freely. And so our COVID projects are really looking at what were those changes that happened, and how do we retain some of the best bits of it for some kind of BAU. If we ever return to a BAU, what does that look like, and how can we kind of share the best practice? So with our projects as they're finishing now, that's been the aim, is to like really get stuff out there quickly and support the rest of the sector.
And what about in Denmark, Per? Are you seeing similar to what we're seeing in the UK?
Well, I think first of all, for context, I should say that even though Denmark sort of closed down earlier than UK, or maybe because of that, we have not had quite as severe restrictions as you have seen in Scotland, or down here in England for that matter. So it was to some extent a bit easier to carry on as usual. But in a more sort of broad sense of the digitization of the public sector, this felt a bit like sort of what we have been training for years. So it's a bit like a firefighting being called out to a fight. Of course, we don't want a fire, but you're glad to use your training. And Denmark has gone quite far with its digitization already. It is now, I think, close to 10 years ago that communication between the public sector and both citizens and companies were digital, unless you requested a specific exemption for that. So for large parts of the public sector, we have actually been able to just carry on as usual, because so much was digital already. As you might or might not be aware, we have had since before I was born actually a common database for Danish citizens. So sort of the identification of citizens across public sector has we started at an easier place than what you have seen here. So I think the biggest place where we discovered that there was still work to do and where people had to improvise was not so much in the administration of the public sector, but more when we had to send the children in schools home to learn from home. And there we had the same sort of scramble for trying out Google tools, etc., as the schools in Britain have had to contend with.
Thanks for that, Per. Jenny, I just wanted to come to you around the whole sort of collaboration side of things, because I mean, the Digital Office is all about collaboration. They're a collaborative organisation set up to support the 32 Scottish councils. And of course, the way that we collaborate has had to change over the last 8 months. And I just wondered if you could give a view around how the collaboration has changed, maybe some of the benefits and maybe some of the pitfalls, and how you view things going forward.
Yeah, touched on this in the OD session this morning. I think we had always thought we were, not just myself in the digital office, but local government were quite good at collaborating. And I think actually this pandemic has actually shown that we weren't good at collaborating, and we have moved forward massively because we've all had shared needs and problems that we've had to solve. So there's been a couple of really good examples, I think, across local government. Helping Hands, which was set up to support shielding people at the initial first lockdown. So it filled a gap because it wasn't a service that we had before. So councils came together, I think there were 6 or 7 councils in the end, to procure a solution and work together to get that solution across a line. The Data Task Force is another really amazing example that will move forward through COVID recovery as well. And I think I liked what you said there, Per, that we've been doing our homework for a lot of time. I feel that the work that the Digital Office had done previous to COVID, things like using Microsoft Teams, trying to get people working on projects collaboratively, trying to get everybody working together on data sharing and better use of data, actually put us in a really good position to drive forward acceleration at the point where the COVID crisis hit. So we've really seen some really amazing things with the Data Task Force. Sarah's team have been developing COVID dashboards along with supporting the governments and local governments Data Task Force. And I really think that Microsoft Teams, I think we've talked a lot about that. Everybody is now on the same platform to the most, I think it's put a level playing field that we didn't have before. And I think moving forward with that, really getting the best use out of Microsoft Teams. So we're not just using it for meetings, but actually developing solutions. One of the pieces of work that we're working on at the Digital Office at the moment is what we're calling the modern workplace. So working with Sarah's team, working with local government, working with COSLA, we are bringing together all the tools that you need for a modern workplace. And that's a really collaborative piece of work. So there are a number of different partners working on that. And I think that's where we'll see the best use of collaboration is focusing on key principles, key scope and key projects that we need to drive forward so that we're all facing in the right direction. I think in the past, we kind of talked about collaboration and we kind of worked alongside each other, but there wasn't any real joined up working. I think we're really seeing that now because we have got that shared vision to a certain extent, which is really amazing and inspiring to see.
I suppose one of the things that I was talking to somebody about the other day is that, there's the 32 councils, and quite often when you run collaboration events, they would either be in Glasgow or Edinburgh, understandably, based travel links.
Yep.
And either the councils that are a bit further away either have to have a huge commitment in time or money, or they don't actually participate. And although there's a lot of challenges around the collaboration remotely, it does actually give an equal playing field to everybody, and it does give people the opportunity from the islands or for Aberdeen. I mean, we had Andy McDonald from Aberdeen speaking yesterday, so I think it really opens up the opportunity to give everybody a voice. And I think within the Digital Office, that's something that's particularly important. Sam, I wondered if you had any good examples of where you've seen collaboration, either across sector or cross organisation, whether there's even anything that you've seen with sort of voluntary sectors and things would be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So with our general fund, normally a stipulation of our funding is that any local authority needs to work with at least one other partner local authority on their work. So our intention is to fund projects that could scale, and as such we want to see that it's not just a very localized response to an issue and a very localized problem. We want to understand that actually it could have applicability across the board. Now, with our COVID funding round, we didn't stipulate that. However, our ways of working have meant that lots of people have collaborated in that way anyway. So one project that particularly springs to mind was Mid Bedfordshire and Camden councils have been working together to understand the data sharing between the councils and the voluntary and community sector that happened within COVID, because obviously every council across the UK needed to find, identify and give supplies to vulnerable people. And there's no way that councils have all of the capacity to be able to do that themselves. So they have had to work with that voluntary and community sector much more, and they've had to provide and receive data in a way that they haven't really done with those organisations before. So that project has just closed its discovery and has got some really good next steps to take the project into alpha, with recommendations for how you can continue that good work with local and voluntary sector. I think on the other side of that, that's working with the people that definitely need it within the community. On the other side of that, we've got something like Greater Manchester working with the Data to Insight team at East Sussex. The Data to Insight team are basically a network of data analysts up and down the country who work in children's social care. So there are about 600 people within this network, and they all use a tool that lets them do a submission to DFE on a regular basis. But actually, they've harnessed the power of that network to deliver a children's social care demand modelling tool. And they did it within like 6 weeks, unbelievable work, by harnessing that network, finding a group of 10 really interested people within local authorities who could test and evaluate and give feedback on the tool. And it meant that they've come out with something within a really short space of time that provides people with like the opportunity to put their data in, to try things out, and to like start getting some of those models back. So it's a really good example of where it is possible to move at pace. It is, if you do have those connections and you've built that community and you have kind of collaborated together. And again, we haven't agreed funding for the next phase yet, but like they're likely to get some more funding from us to kind of take that a step further and work out how to work even better with that community. So there's a lot of like acknowledgement that, to go further and to go faster, we have to collaborate to do it. And it's been kind of impressive that under such adversity, there has been adversity and scarcity of resources, that people have actually kind of stuck their heads above the water and said, no, this is really important to me, this is going to make a big difference, and have then just got on and done it and shared it with the rest of the community, which I think is great.
Sam. Sarah, I've got a follow-up question for you actually, and I don't know if you'll have the level of detail that the question refers to, but one of the things that you mentioned was you've seen massive take-up of the MyGov Scot account, and we just wondered if you got any further intel on this, like how big's the increase been, what's driving it, like what are people using it for? Do you have any information from councils that's saying here are the services that people are trying to access digitally?
I suppose in terms of the take-up, we're now sitting at about 1.2 million users. So I think probably roughly since the pandemic, we've gained another 200,000 users using my account. So given that I suppose my account came into being roughly, and I'll probably get some of these dates wrong, but I think it was 2014. And by the turn of the year, we were hitting just about 1 million accounts. So you think we've got 1 million accounts between 2014 and 2020. And then between, I guess, March and now, we've got roughly another 200,000. So that works out at, I think it's roughly over a fifth of the eligible population in Scotland who can apply for a My Account now have a My Account. I think some of that take-up has been helped by, we've launched a parents portal, which we're delivering in partnership with CMIS, and that's providing a whole range of services to parents from the one place. And we've certainly noticed that during the pandemic, there's been councils and schools have come forward to say that actually they want to sign up to the parents portal because it'll be a really good way of, I suppose, pushing information out to parents, but also a good way of parents accessing services. So every parent that accesses the parents portal has to have a My Account to be able to do so. So I think that's certainly led to an increase. And also rolling out the getyournec.scot has led to an increase in usage as well. And we have been, and I suppose the other thing is that I think there's now about 26, 27 councils using my account, and some councils that weren't using it before March, we're now working with them to onboard it, because I think, you know, clearly they recognise that the use of digital services is only going to continue to grow, and that my account can play a role in supporting them with their authentication. So again, I think onboarding new councils has also started to help with the growth.
And Sam, I've got a follow-up question for yourself as well, as around, you talked about around the projects that you try and sponsor and invest in are things that ideally can be replicated elsewhere or can grow. How can other local authorities get involved and pick up on these new developments and sort of share and collaborate on the learning?
Yeah, number of ways. So there is a cross-government a local gov digital Slack channel, which most people working in the UK will know. I'm not sure about uptake with Scotland, but most local authorities, digital people at least, will be on there. We also publish all of the outputs from our projects in the open. So we have the localdigital.gov.uk website includes all of the information about all of the projects we've funded, and either some PDFs, don't tell anyone, but some PDFs and some outputs, and links to pages where you can find that information too. We also have a blog on Medium, and lots of our projects, actually, some of them will blog on their own sites or on their local authority sites, but a lot of them have started blogging on our site as well, which means that there's a lot of information all in one place. And also we've got a regular newsletter. In our first round of funding, we did actually do like a local authority matchmaking session, whereby we asked people to put in requests and we tried to sort of join them up with people who were doing similar things. Now, we had a lot of feedback on that it was good. The admin burden was massive, and actually one of the things that we've started to see happening is you might get a kind of first follower situation, and then other local authorities come along as those projects work in the open and as they start sharing outputs like regularly with people. So it's one of the things that we've dropped, but there are lots of different ways of finding out more about us. Oh, and Twitter as well. We're all over Twitter.
So everybody's talked in a very positive sense around the pace of change is speeding up, about what you've been able to deliver. But what about what you've not been able to deliver? Jenny, I was going to ask you, like, with the change in focus of the digital office, has there been things that you've made a decision that at the moment it's just not a priority, or they're now off the table? So I suppose it's back to when we were thinking about how COVID's changed or shaped your strategic plans. You talked about around what you were doing, but what does it mean for the stuff that hasn't been happening? Do we think that will come back on the table, or as things just moved on? And I know that you'd spoken, Sarah, about changing your strategic priorities. So Jenny, I'll come to you first and just get you to talk a wee bit about what your views on what we've not been able to do.
Yeah, and I think it probably does tie into the strategic, how did your strategic plans change? So the digital office, quite similarly to what Sarah was talking about with the launch of their next executive plan, our digital office 2.0 only launched in October, and it had a huge amount of projects and programs under the portfolio. It was a huge undertaking for the next 2 years. And what it actually allowed us to do after COVID was to look at what were the real priorities, what were the needs, and where are the gaps in local government. And actually, we pretty much dropped everything that was on the portfolio at that time and only focused on things that were going to add real value to Council's response. And that was things like acceleration of Microsoft 365, collaboration, data sharing, data task force. We have certainly picked up other things since we're moving towards recovery and renewal. So there has been other areas of the portfolio we've able to stand back up again, things like digital maturity assessments, digital champions training with the SCBO. We've been able to progress with some of our training courses, for example. But actually what we've learned in the last 9 months with the digital office is that we were much better, we were delivering quicker and at pace when we were being responsive and when we were more focused. So actually we have completely redone the digital office 2.0. I think it's like 2.0 2.1 or something now, and we have and we have focused on things that are really going to offer the value and the gaps to council. So there's definitely been things that we haven't been able to progress, and probably has allowed us the opportunity to say, no, we're not going to bother progressing with those things now. Some of the foundational work around IT infrastructure and things, some of the robotics pieces and IoT were paused, but they will pick up as well, I think, as we move forward. But right now, they're not the key focus for councils. It is around culture engagement, the modern workplace, how that will work, how we respond and move forward with the remote working and distributed teams, and how we can really focus on frontline staff. So I think it's allowed us the opportunity, I think, to be more focused.
I suppose that's the thing, Jenny, because the discussion around the digital office has often been around how thin you're spread for such a small team.
Yep.
And one of the challenges, I suppose, is with 32 authorities, everybody's got conflicting priorities. You want everybody to feel like they're getting something from it, and I suppose that's one of the things that during COVID that people were much more pulling in the same direction. So to a certain extent, that's maybe been one of the opportunities during the COVID response, as you were able to speed up that pace of change purely because everybody had a much clearer sense of direction. So I think it'll be really interesting to see the 2.1 digital office plan and how that's received by the councils. But I think that if it means that people are seeing more deliverables and more outcome-based stuff, I think that can only be welcomed. Per, what about from a Danish point of view? What would you say are the most important lessons from COVID?
The most important lessons from COVID, I think. I was very sort of encouraged by what Sarah said about the uptake of the My GovScot, was that the name, account? Because I think one of the things that we have seen is that really having these sort of central infrastructure blocks in digitization in place is really important, and that makes it quick to develop new ad hoc solutions. So if you, in our case, there's a sort of standardized way of verifying identity. There's a standardized communication channel for the public sector, and having those kind of sort of central building blocks in place then means that it is quite quick to develop new individual applications that are just linked up to those. And I think we have sort of found also in this case that when, as part of the development of the track and trace app, for instance, that having those communication channels and identification in place meant that was could be very quickly and easily rolled out.
Thanks for that, Per. Sarah, what about you? Maybe a lessons learned? Like, what's the most important lesson from COVID?
I think a couple of things that probably jump out at me are which local government has been change, and I think one example that sticks in my mind, because I previously worked in a local authority as a customer services manager and had to set up a customer call centre and service centre, and it took quite a bit of time, quite a lot of research, quite a lot of council papers. And there's an example in the pandemic of a council setting up a virtual call centre, which wasn't even in the cards when I worked in the local authority, within 72 hours. So for me, that is real evidence that this can actually be done, and things have moved at pace. Now, I don't think that's always going to be sustainable, because I know there are people starting to feel, I suppose, the burnout and the pressure. But for me, there's something in there about what stops us moving at pace in I suppose, normal times, and what can we learn from how we moved at pace under the pandemic and take that forward with us. And I think the other big thing for me is really about the whole empowerment, certainly through research that we've been doing with colleagues across local authorities. There is a real sense that, the big organisations have had to just leave staff and communities to get on with it. to take responsibility, to be innovative, to try different things based on the challenges that they're facing. And I guess, given the whole empowerment agenda within Scotland, for me, there's something about how we hang on to that and we take that forward with us as well.
I think that's a really important point, Sarah, about no going back to the way that things were before. I mean, I think that the maybe leaner governance, the empowerment, people being able to just get on and do things is a really refreshing change. And I know that I really hope that that's something that the public sector embraces, and that we use governance to minimise risk where it's needed, as opposed to sometimes being a bit of a blocker. Sam, do you want to come in with any response to Sarah, or with your most important lessons from COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, I'm glad Sarah mentioned burnout, because I really wanted to just, like, give a massive shout out to anyone who's working in local government at the moment, because, like, this has been, you know, that working at pace has not just been for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, it's been for most of the year now. And you know, to keep up that level of working, I think it just shows the dedication of the sector and, you know, what they're willing to do. And we had lots and lots of projects come our way for funding, and we funded quite a few of them around community engagement, and that's community engagement above and beyond the statutory requirements for engagement, if that makes sense. There's a real desire within local governments to continue to work with disadvantaged people and to make sure that they're represented and to have their voices heard. And I do think that this has been a massive opportunity in kind of forcing that sea change and making sure that there is more of a focus on the user, as it were, you know, the public, to make sure that their needs are met. So if anything is retained from this debacle, like all this terrible year of 2020, I really hope it's that continued focus on those people.
Jenny, I know that you talked a wee bit around being much more focused within the digital office. Is there anything else that you want to add around the lessons learned piece?
I think again, just echoing what Sarah and Sam have said, it is about keeping up the agility, leaner governance, definitely. One of the things that we learned from the digital maturity assessment is that delivery and strategy don't often marry up, and what we've really seen with the COVID response is that we are delivering to the strategies. So I think if we can make sure that we make those tactical things that we're doing aligned to the vision that we've set for ourselves, I think that would be one of the things that we've learned, that we can do it. I think that is it. I think we've shown that we can do it. And we need to keep it up. I agree, we can't keep up the pace. I think everybody's pretty much counting down the days to Christmas. But at the same time, you know, we have to keep moving forward with all of those things. And I think, yeah, absolutely, aligning the delivery models to strategy is a key thing. And it is something that we've recognised as part of the digital maturity assessments that's been lacking for some time with local government. The other thing as well is the collaboration within councils, not just across the sector. Alignment of HR and OD has really been amazing, I think, in the response. You know, they're aligned to all the tactical projects and are completely embedded in the things that are happening. I think that's been a really good lesson. We see the best use of innovation and things driving forward when sort of you've got a mixed team across all the silos within government as well. I think that would be the other things we want to take forward.
Thanks for that, Jenny. So as we start to look forward then, Sarah, I know that you had talked a wee bit earlier around some of your plans for the future, and you'd said that your strategic outcomes, you've actually changed some of your strategic plans. So what are some of the key things that you're looking to deliver or support organisations in over the next year?
Thanks, Esther. So I suppose one of our other big priorities, which we hope we'll get into next year, because we'll be in a situation where we will be moving on beyond response to renewal. But I guess another one of our big priorities is to look at how we support local government and individual councils to rebuild after COVID. And I guess it's back to, I suppose, what I was saying earlier, is about how do we leverage all the transformation and learning that has been happening? How do we take that forward? And I think certainly what all the evidence is showing is that, you know, inequalities have just widened as a result of COVID, and you know, people who were probably managing fine before COVID are now struggling. So I think in the work that we are doing, there'll be a real focus on, I suppose, supporting that service redesign, service transformation, with a focus on prevention, tackling inequality, and a real drive on digital. But I think within that also making sure that we've got an eye on digital exclusion, because I think the other thing that I suppose this whole 9 months has flagged up is that, you know, inequalities in terms of access to digital have they've always been there, but I think this has really shown them and highlighted them. So I think certainly for us going forward with our digital public services, you know, we're looking at you know, I guess a key priority will be working with Scottish Government round about their plans for digital identity. And I guess within that, it's looking at how we can do that as inclusively as possible. So that's, I suppose, a big priority in a nutshell, is really to support the service redesign and transformation, with a big focus on prevention and tackling inequality.
And Per, what about in Denmark? What are the objectives as we start to look forward? I know that you'd said that some of the restrictions haven't been as bad in Denmark, but I can imagine that there's still some adaptations that need to be made looking forward to next year.
Yeah, I guess a lot of what we have to focus on is sort of the long tail of COVID. I think there are, as also alluded before, there's probably some stresses to society in general that we haven't really discovered yet, in particular in the healthcare sector and the what is called on the authorities working with vulnerable people in the community. That has all been proved on a back burner to some extent to space out capacity. So I'm sure we will have to work for quite some time before we can say that times are really back to normal. And similarly, even though we have the first vaccine approved in the UK now, there will be, I think, probably for the next year, we will still have to work with the digital support of corona surveillance and sort of verification of vaccine and testing, etc. For the year to come. Right now, we are it's quite a lot of discussion on how best we handle sort of the verification of people tested or vaccinated, and what that means for how they can interact with the rest of society.
All right, thanks for that. And then Sam, what about at MHCLG? What about plans for the future over the next year?
It's very hard to say. I think for us, you know, we are lucky-ish in a way, in that we get to do the nice work of giving money to people. I think for us it's a case of responding to the sector and responding to the needs, and really listening and funding the right things on that basis. So I think for us, there's likely to be we're likely to be looking in more detail at these COVID-19 projects that we've already funded, and seeing what more we can do to kind of extend their life, or to bring them into, like I said, BAU, if there is such a thing as BAU working. But yeah, I think for us, we're going to have to be flexible ourselves and see how things progress.
And so here's a question out the chat, and I'm going to be asked for a volunteer. It's a bit a controversial one. So how do you think that the organisation's transformational plans will be impacted upon by budgets next year and in the future? I think everybody's really concerned around what the future holds in relation to local government budgets. Do you think that it provides an opportunity to drive the transformational change, or do we think that we'll see project staff, IT budgets being cut, and there then being a kind of race to the bottom in relation to what's possible? I don't know if somebody wants to volunteer to answer that.
I'll volunteer. Chuck myself in the firing line with the controversial one. I think that in the past, we definitely would have seen that being a limitation, and IT and change budgets are often cut back in times of trial. But I think because of the last 6 months, I think it's proven the need for a focus on digital and a focus on transformation plans. So I actually think, and definitely what we're hearing across the sector, is that they will be bolstered in terms of driving things forward, because what we've proven in the last 6 months is that IT and transformation need to be invested in to take things forward. And I think there's a real recognition amongst particularly HR networks that the role of council workers is completely changing because of digital, and because of the nature of, the impact on having in-person services mean that we need to think about removing some of the transactional things. So I actually think it will be an opportunity, and we will see investment in those areas because it's been shown that we need it.
And what about some of the areas? Oh, Sam, on you go.
I was just gonna say, yeah, totally agree with what Jenny said. I do think it's actually a really great opportunity. Like, our team exists in order to try and find those smaller component parts that can build digital services and technology. We know that lots of local authorities have been sort of encumbered by big suppliers who maybe aren't quite so responsive to their needs or so flexible. So, a huge part of our work is trying to identify those either smaller suppliers or smaller bits of product that can be used and taken and reused. I think it offers a really good opportunity as well for the market to come in with a lot of new ideas of ways of working, things that can plug in. So for me, I think actually, hopefully, this is actually a really good opportunity.
I suppose, just as a follow-on from that, some of the areas that have been maybe traditionally more difficult to get change within, maybe our colleagues in the health and social care partnerships or within education, we've actually seen change that we could never have imagined like 8 or 9 months ago. And I know that, Sarah, you've talked about huge uptake like the parents portal, but even some of the examples that I've heard around sort of video calling and doctor surgeries, people like social workers reaching out to their cases through using technology. And actually, if you just proposed that like a year or 18 months ago, it would have been very, very difficult. And again, it's not about the technology, it's actually about that cultural change. And I just wondered if anybody wanted to respond on the opportunity now that actually some of that change has actually been tried and tested. The idea that it wouldn't work, well, that's disappeared. And where there is now opportunities in maybe some of the more traditional service delivery areas, and being honest, some of the highest cost areas, as to how that might help us to meet the budget challenges going forward.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Esther. So things like Near Me has been hugely successful in the NHS, and it's now being rolled out in the health and social care partnerships. There's definitely opportunities there, and as you say, it's tried and tested. So people now have more faith in it, and also digital skills of social workers and other workers have been tested as well, and they've kind of got a little bit more confidence around that. Learning and teaching, obviously, we're seeing better use of Teams. Teachers embracing certain things that they maybe wouldn't have in the past, and it's really showing that can be done. I completed a couple of digital maturity assessments during lockdown, and some of the things that were coming out of some of the partner councils around better use of data for getting care packages out to people, and also in the learning and teaching environment as well, kids building apps that are getting shared across the sector as well. So I think you're right. I think some of those more difficult to reach areas have really kind of shown a lot of innovation, and I think the trick will be to try and capture some of that really good examples and learning, and upscale and upskill everybody on those things.
All right, so I'm conscious of the time. Does anybody have any final comments that they'd like to make before I bring things to a close? No. All right, so it just leaves me to say thanks very much for all our panel members for taking the time to join us this morning. We will be back at 12 o'clock, where we will be hearing from Gordon Scobie of Yoti. They're actually one of the providers or work in partnership with the Improvement Service around digital identity. And they've been doing some really exciting work during the pandemic around the whole bioscience and how you can link your testing to a digital identity. And he's going to talk about around how they really had to pivot and change their whole strategy and organisation's approach to adapt to the demand during the pandemic. So if you join us at 12 o'clock, I think that'll be a really interesting session. And thanks once again to all our panel members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank